Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media on this Friday, March 25th, 2022. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go to weather.gov and it'll bring you a map that comes up with the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left there. And when you click on it, you can go to any location in the country and get the latest forecast, watches, warnings, advisories, and much more information. On the map this afternoon, we have red flag warnings that are in effect for portions of South Dakota and Nebraska, that area of the Plain State experiencing some rather dry and high fire danger. Well, the big weather story for us has been a significant avalanche occurred overnight last night into early this Friday morning on Highland Road, just outside of Eagle River, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But nevertheless, avalanche warnings continue for the West Chugach and Kenai Mountains into early Saturday morning, so keep that in mind if you're thinking of any sort of recreating or travel in these areas. A winter storm watch has been issued for the eastern Aleutians and Pribilof Islands for Sunday into Monday, as an area of low pressure is going to track along the central and eastern Aleutians, and then another piece of energy, another low, is going to join up with it, and that's what's going to get the snow and wind going in that area as we get into the late weekend. Also coming up next week, we have a few changes to the National Weather Service's Alaska weather zones, and I'll highlight those after I get through the primary headlines. Well, here is an image by Lauren Holmes, thanks to the Anchorage Daily News, of the avalanche that occurred there on Highland Road near Eagle River. It's along the south branch of the Eagle River, and you can see it's just roughly about 500 feet wide, and it's estimated that the snow in places is as deep as 75 to near 80 feet, so it's a rather significant avalanche. The good news is, though, there are no reports of injuries or any major structural damage. This avalanche, of course, occurred. We've had conditions lately that this time of year very favorable. You have the old snowpack, but then you get new snow on top of that, and it makes for rather unstable conditions. The freeze-thaw cycle also contributes. The homeowners here, there's about 100 or so residents affected by power outages, and then the ability to get in and out of the area. So it's going to take several days, if not a week or two, to get that cleared out, and they'll begin to do that as soon as conditions are safe enough and stable to do so. Check out this image taken by Gene Petrescu of the Weather Service. You can see how in that chute, when the snow came roaring down, it took out the trees there just above the road, as well as the power lines, and as a result there are power outages as well. And here's an image of how it looked along Highland Drive. The snow there at least 30-40 feet deep. And so again, fortunately, no reports of any injuries. But we also have blizzard warnings that continue in effect along the Arctic coast there, Prudhoe Bay toward Katovik, until midnight Saturday night. Persistent easterly winds gusting as high as 40 miles an hour will create whiteout conditions at times. And then you see to the south, the bottom of the screen, the avalanche warnings continue in effect for the eastern Kenai Mountains on up in the area surrounding Whittier, Prince William Sound on the west side. Conditions will remain favorable for avalanches here in through at least early Saturday morning. So stay tuned to later forecast if you're planning travel in those areas or any sort of backcountry recreating. Off to the south and west, you see the areas in orange. Those are the winter storm watches in effect for St. Paul, St. George, and down through the eastern Aleutians, including Unalaska Dutch Harbor. The weather conditions there are expected to really deteriorate as we go through Sunday morning and afternoon. Could see snow and blowing snow. Now, right now, Seward, the area that got the heavier precipitation, the snow in the mountains, rain along the coast this morning, that has since let up some sprinkles, 40 degrees there, but you can see significant snow cover there as you go up in the elevations there of the mountains. As a result, that's why the avalanche danger is so high there. Off further southwest, Dutch Harbor, beautiful afternoon. Some breaks in the cloud, especially off to the north and northeast, but looking toward the south, you can see the advancing high clouds ahead of the next weather system that's going to be moving into the region. That's the same system that's going to bring the eastern Aleutians the potential for blizzard conditions here as we go through the late weekend. And looking at the weather zone changes coming up here, this is mainly a transparent thing to most people, a transfer of forecast office responsibility. So we're going to go from Anchorage to the Fairbanks office. Fairbanks will assume now the responsibility for Cantwell, as well as Hooper Bay and Shevak there in the southwest part of the state. Fairbanks to Anchorage. Anchorage will assume Mentasta Lake and Chisana forecast and warning responsibility in the eastern Alaska range. And also a new marine zone has been created, Marine Zone 201, Etolan Strait to Dial Point. That'll be the responsibility of the Fairbanks office. If you'd like more detailed information, you can find it in the news headlines at the top of the National Weather Service Anchorage and Fairbanks web pages. Looking at the satellite imagery, we can see a curl in the clouds. That's that low pulling back, retrograding to near Kodiak, the entrance there of Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait. That low will continue working its way westward into tomorrow to Bristol Bay along the southwest coast and weaken. See high clouds, curl in the clouds near Adak. That's the one low that's currently working its way eastward through the central Aleutians. What's going to happen, though, as we go into Sunday, another low, an impulse of energy and moisture, is going to come up out of the North Pacific and link up with this and kind of join forces over the eastern Aleutians and near and just south there of Sand Point. And that's what's going to create the potentially winter storm conditions there, blizzard conditions there along the eastern Aleutians and Pribilof Islands as we get into Sunday and Sunday night. Low pressure now is located there on Kodiak, near Kodiak Island, working its way westward. We have the one low there just kind of southwest of the central Aleutians. As we get into late tonight, early Saturday morning, the low, it'll be crossing Shelikof Strait westward into the Bristol Bay area and weakening by Saturday afternoon. But the low in the central Aleutians is going to chug its way east and will continue to do so through Saturday afternoon. But watch what happens as we get into Sunday. That low in the eastern Aleutians, it blows up. It drops to 968 millibar low because there's another low center in energy coming up from the North Pacific joining up with that, and that's when the conditions will really deteriorate there over the southeast portion of the Bering Sea back toward the Pribilof Islands and the eastern Aleutians. This low will take a track northeastward and spread more wind, rain, and snow up along first the west side of the Gulf and then eventually on over toward the Panhandle by later Monday into Tuesday of next week. Low temperatures generally will be near a bit above freezing along the coastal areas. Interior could see lows teens, Copper River Basin, McGrath. Highs tomorrow 40-ish in Anchorage, low mid-40s, the Panhandle. And on Sunday morning, similar thing, near a little below freezing in the Panhandle. Same thing along south central coast, below freezing interior. Daytime highs still back up near 40 at places like Kodiak, Anchorage, as well as Skagway. And mid-40s there in the lower portion of the Panhandle. Sub-zero along the north slope, Yukon Flats Saturday morning, but we are going to see temperatures back up near or above freezing south of the Yukon River. In fact, it was at least 40 degrees this afternoon in Fairbanks for a break, and highs will be in the single digits above or below zero right along the Arctic coast. Again, below zero north slope and Arctic coast, Yukon Flats Sunday morning. Single digits and teens elsewhere. Highs should generally be back up near or above freezing along and south of the Yukon River, especially, say from Galena and Fairbanks southward. And along areas of the southwest interior, lows tonight, teens, below freezing across the Alaska Peninsula, near freezing by the time you get out toward the eastern Aleutians. Saturday's highs should get back up into the 30s, above freezing there across much of the southwest interior along the western Alaska range. And Sunday morning lows will be near freezing along the Alaska Peninsula into the eastern Aleutians, and generally upper teens to say lower 20s across the southwest interior, with temperatures again Sunday afternoon generally getting above freezing along the Kuskokwim River, west arm of the Alaska range, and extending out from the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians. The extended temperature outlook March 31st through April 4th is indicating a good likelihood of above normal temperatures across the southern third of the state, centered on Anchorage, Kodiak, Dillingham, Bethel, and then areas in the far north, the north slope, may see temperatures average a little below normal, and precipitation looks like it could average above normal, centered on Cook Inlet on the south side of the Alaska range. So we'll see how the next series of weather systems unfold here as we close out the month and begin April. But keep in mind, we are at that time of year now. It's a transition as we head a little further along into the spring season.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, now it's time for the pilots. Our aviation weather coming up here. If you have a flight planned, you're thinking about Saturday into Sunday, The main weather feature is going to be an area of low pressure riding along out from the central into the eastern Aleutians, and then it's going to join up with another impulse coming up out of the North Pacific that'll help create a low there south of the Alaska Peninsula. It's going to send a surge of moisture back up along the Alaska Peninsula, western, and then eventually northern and eastern Gulf Coast as we get into early next week, but at least early on this weekend. As we go through Sunday into early Monday, the impacts will be mainly through the southwest parts of the state. We expect IFR conditions to continue along the Arctic coast there. The wind gradient has been held up, allowing for some blowing, drifting snow. And remnant moisture, we have a weakening low that's going to retrograde westward from Kodiak Island today to Bristol Bay, the southwest coast on Saturday. That feature will weaken as a compact low. Near the central Aleutians will be working its way eastward. It's also going to have the potential to produce near blizzard or blizzard conditions, perhaps from around St. Paul southward through the eastern Aleutians as we go through Sunday into early Monday. And as that next impulse, low pressure, lifts out of the North Pacific, it's going to increase the IFR conditions across the southeast Barren Alaska Peninsula on up toward Kodiak Island in the entrance there of Cook Inlet for Sunday morning, and look for rather widespread IFR conditions across the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and the southeast portion of the Bering Sea for Sunday afternoon. Anaktuvuk Pass on Saturday should hold on to VFR conditions, as will Adigan Pass. Further south and west on the west arm of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill will remain MVFR, though there could be some IFR lagging there just outside the east entrance of Lake Clark on Saturday morning. Rainy Pass should generally be MVFR on Saturday, as will Windy Pass going through the central Alaska Range into the eastern Alaskan Range at Isabel Pass. We expect MVFR conditions. And then further east there near the Alcan border, we expect Mentasta to become VFR on Saturday, especially by afternoon. And further south and west, Tenedo should generally hold on to MVFR conditions throughout Saturday, as will Portage Pass, especially the east side there, including Prince William Sound, though there could be VFR conditions on the west entrance there Saturday. And for the northern portion of the Panhandle, we expect Chilkoot and White to enjoy a VFR day there. Freezing levels, Saturday morning, the surface freezing line is in through the inner channels of the Panhandle along the northern Gulf Coast, across Kodiak Island, just south of the Alaska Peninsula, crossing back through the eastern Aleutians up into the lower portion of the Bering Sea. Otherwise, you can see a bump of 2,000 to 4,000 foot freezing levels just south there of the central and eastern Aleutians associated with that compact area of low pressure. And with that low pressure system working from the central Aleutians into the eastern Aleutians Saturday into Sunday, we expect some considerable moderate icing possible between 3,000 and 15,000 feet there, central into the eastern Aleutians on Saturday into Saturday evening. And isolated moderate icing possible still over portions of the western Gulf between 5,000 and 12,000 feet. Looking at the jet stream level, the most notable feature is an anticyclonic jet core that has winds of 125 to 135 knots from the west. They're just south of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. As we come down to 9,000 feet, we see that low pressure circulation there, central eastern Aleutians just on the north side of the chain, with counterclockwise circulation, strongest winds southeast there of the eastern Aleutians to 65 knots from the southwest, and then bringing it down to 3,000 feet. We see that low pressure circulation there over the eastern half of the Aleutians, and core winds around that at 3,000 feet are around 50 to 55 knots in a counterclockwise manner. And we bring that down to the surface. We expect areas of turbulence from the surface to 4,000 feet across much of the central into the eastern Aleutians up to the western tip there of the Alaska Peninsula on Saturday. And still there could be some turbulence surface to 6,000 feet in the vicinity of Cook Inlet, the Kenai Peninsula back toward the southwest interior. So that wraps it up for your flight weather. If you are thinking about a flight here this weekend, definitely check the latest conditions and forecast. And if you are able to get out, have a safe flight.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. He is here and has been here many times to talk to us about weather satellites and how those can help Alaskans understand our weather, how we can do better detection, keep more people safe from things even like volcanic ash. But today, Eric, you're going to talk to us a little bit more about weather satellites and how that can keep Alaskans safe and protect our property from wildfire, right?
That's right, Dave. Today's topic is where there's smoke, there's fire. And thanks for having us back again to Alaska
Anytime.
Weather. Well, weather satellites have a lot of different instruments on them. It turns out that the electromagnetic spectrum has a lot going on in it, and only one part of that is visible light, what we see.
Right.
Weather satellites, of course, report that. Today's topic is wildfires.
Okay.
There are some people who say that in Alaska in the summertime you don't have severe weather. These people are usually from Oklahoma or somewhere, and F5 tornadoes tend not to occur in Alaska.
Right.
People have also said what we do have in the summer. What is Alaska's severe summer weather can be hydrology,
Right.
flash flood and erosion in the mountains and things like that, and fires, wildfires.
Absolutely.
Those were here in 2004, certainly remember that. We've got an example here from 2014. Now it was a quiet season overall, but in May, down on the Kenai Peninsula, we had a wildfire on the Funny River, and this is a satellite image from a polar orbiter that went right over Alaska, and we can see the plume of smoke coming out of that fire on the Kenai, curling down. It's caught in the wind.
Right.
It goes down toward Kodiak Island, curves around. You can see it circulating around a low pressure system that's in the Gulf of Alaska.
It was a beautiful picture.
Oh my gosh.
Except there was a fire.
There's a fire there. The nice thing is with this satellite image, you can tell where the fire origin is, where the
Right.
smoke is coming from. And it's a color image. We're looking at the wavelength spectrum of about 0.4 to 0.7 micrometers or microns. That's what the human eye would see. If you were riding on the satellite and looked down, you could see this kind of an image.
Right.
So that's pretty nice. But it turns out there's more to the electromagnetic spectrum than just visible light.
Okay.
You've heard of infrared, ultraviolet, that kind of thing. If we move into longer wavelengths, let's go to one specifically, 3.7 micron.
Okay, 3.7.
Why worry about that one? Well, we've got an example here. 3.7, it turns out, happens to be very sensitive to a certain temperature range, temperatures where fires burn.
Okay.
And so we've got an example zoomed in a little more from that same Funny River fire down on the Kenai Peninsula, and we can see that you get up into a few hundred degrees Fahrenheit,
Right.
and that's where the colors are. We can see there on the Funny River fire to the west and to the east, almost a horseshoe shape there, is not only we're seeing where the fire is in a general sense, but specifically where it's the active fire
That is where
front.
it's burning right now.
And it's
Amazing.
3.7 microns is the important temperature there.
Okay.
That's right.
So this is really important to firefighters on the ground, people that are making plans and directing the firefighters on where they need to go and cut the trenches and keep people safe.
You know it. If you want to fight that fire, you got to know where it is.
Okay.
You got to know the leading edge. We've also got a movie loop, nothing quite like animating it in time.
Yeah.
You can see the fire spreading out over time with a succession of film or succession of images. Now this is one channel, 3.7 micron. You know, we looked at that color smoke image before.
Right.
And that's actually a red, a green, and a blue. That's how you get color imagery. What if you took 3 different wavelengths in the infrared? You went from like 2.2 micron, 1.5 micron, up to 3.7. You mix them together, you get this other kind of color image, which is even a better way to sharply bring out the details of where that leading edge of the fire is.
Okay.
You'll note, though, in the infrared, guess what? We don't see the smoke. That's too bad. And on these movie loops, you can see the clouds go by. These channels can't see through clouds. The lesson is there's no one perfect solution. You got to have the visible, you got to have some of that infrared single 3.7 channel, some of the infrared mixing to help get a different perspective. Another one, we've talked before about a fun channel called the day-night band.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and in Alaska in the winter, it's great. We got all this darkness. The day-night band is so sensitive to seeing light. You can see features that otherwise aren't available. Now in Alaska, when you have a forest fire, it tends to be light out all the time.
Right.
It's our summer. But we can go down south to the Rim Fire in California in 2013. Now, okay, it was in California, not Alaska, but Alaskan crews went down to fight that fire, so we can talk about it here on Alaska Weather. Here we have a 3.7 micron channel shot of the rim fire, again kind of a horseshoe shape showing that active fire front down there, and then we'll look again to the day-night band the visible light, and then you can see how the fire is all bright. You can see the active fire front and actually the city lights over there too. Turns out that the cities, while they're active in a social sense, are not really hot in a fire sense. So they don't show up in the 3.7 micron. They're not hot like a fire is, but the fire in the cities look the same from a visible light perspective. And a fun thing here too is that we can see the smoke plume going north from the rimfire on the day-night band. So if we were ever to have, like in 2004 in Alaska, you get dark at night, we still had an active fire season that year.
Right.
That was, you know, that really bad year. The day-night band didn't exist then, but if we had fires now in August, we could use it then. The lesson here is weather satellites, they offer many different wavelengths of light. Some are used for different purposes, and some of these we just looked at tonight are especially helpful here in Alaska to find and to track the behavior of these wildfires so the crews can go out there and do their jobs.
Sure, sure. So a satellite toolbox for the firefighting crews and the fire weather forecasters, and it just underlines how important satellites are, especially for Alaska and our mission for the National Weather Service to protect life and property, and also to enhance the national economy. So wonderful stuff there, Eric. And people can look at pictures like this anytime by going to gina.alaska.edu. You'll find images there all around Alaska at various times of the year, and not just about fire weather, but volcanic ash and smoke and anything else you want to check out. They're always beautiful pictures and always interesting to look at no matter what time of the day. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it and welcome you back anytime. For this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. See you next time. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's check the sea ice edge. We're going to start with an image from last weekend, March 19th, about a week ago. And as we advance to today's date, the 25th of March, we can see that the ice has pushed all the way down to almost to St. George. This hasn't happened since early 2017, early April of 2017. And we're going to continue to see a southward advance of the pack ice here through the course of the weekend because of an upcoming storm system. I'll highlight that as we go through the Aleutian and the Alaska Peninsula portion of the marine forecast. Otherwise, for the Panhandle this weekend, Saturday, north winds through the inner channels, 10 to 15 knots, waves 2-3 feet. Outer channels, generally north winds 10 to 15 knots, Gustavus southward, still southeast component, Yakutat westward, waves 6-7 feet. On Sunday, we'll continue to see inner channel winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. Outer channel, west-northwest, 10 to 20 knots, south of Gustavus, and then variable around 5 knots, Yakutat westward. Across the northwest Gulf, we see winds that will be on Saturday, strongest at the entrance there of Cook Inlet, 30 knots from the east. Easterly winds in Prince William Sound, 15 knots, waves maybe a few feet there. Otherwise, nothing too impressive. Sunday, we'll see those winds even pick up a bit more to 40 knots from the east there at the entrance of Cook Inlet due to the fact we have a low that's going to be working its way up along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula later this weekend and into early next week. Looking at Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, winds will generally be south-southwest around 15 knots, at least in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, but picking up to 35 knots there just off of Sand Point, and easterly 35 knots north of Cold Bay, as we have one area of low pressure. On Saturday, it'll be pushing into the eastern Aleutians. And then that system's going to combine with another one lifting out of the North Pacific, and we're going to see the winds as that low deepens. 45-knot gales around Kodiak Island there with waves 15-17 feet. On the backside, 40 to 45-knot gale force winds from Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay. Waves as high as 15 feet there on the Bering side. And then looking at the Aleutian chain, Saturday we have low pressure passing through the eastern Aleutians. We have 40-45 knot gales circulating around that in a counterclockwise manner. And as we go into Sunday, and the backside of that low as the next low rides up and deepens there at the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, we're going to see 40-45 knot gales across the central eastern Aleutians. That could result in blizzard conditions in the eastern Aleutians on up toward the Pribilof Islands. And then along the west coast, of course, we see generally a northwest to north component to the wind, 10, 20 knots over the ice, northeasterly 30 knots east of St. Paul, so that pack ice will continue to drift southwards. And then look, as that low deepens across the south end of the Alaska Peninsula on Sunday, we see the northerly flow increase as high as 40 knots along the ice edge and off of say the lower Kuskokwim Delta, so that is definitely going to force the ice further southward, encompassing St. George and areas to the east. Along the Arctic coast, winds will hold up at 30 knots with the ice in place, easterly 15 to 25 knots off the northwest coast between Wainwright and Point Hope, and generally west-northwest winds through the Bering Strait only at 10 knots. And then on Sunday, Arctic coast winds come down a little bit, at least compared to what they have been the past week, 20 to 25 knots out of the east. And along the lower Chukchi through the strait, we expect 10 to 15 knot winds accelerating to 20 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. So Saturday afternoon, we see one area of low pressure there out over the eastern Aleutians. But as the secondary low and another piece of stronger energy lifts northward out of the North Pacific, it's going to form a low there near and south of the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, bottoming out around 970, 968 millibars. So we expect those stronger gale force winds wrapping around the low on the backside, creating the potential for some nastier winter weather, some locally heavier snows and blizzard conditions Sunday into at least early Monday. And that system will continue tracking northeastward up along the west side of the Gulf and spreading more moisture throughout the Gulf early next week. So that does it for the week, for the show. Thank you for watching. And be sure to check out the show again this weekend. Dave Percy will be the presenter then. Have yourself a safe and good weekend.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.